Right, let's share that, and you should be able to see that. And then away we go. So, welcome everybody to this week's Data Protection Forum. We run this forum every 2 weeks at 9 o'clock on a Wednesday morning. We pick a different subject each time, and this is actually our 15th time of running the forum. So if you've not attended the forum previously, please do just stalk us, and we can get you access to the recordings of the previous forums. But today we're going to talk about from compliance to competitive edge, turning GDPR consent into business gold. Because lots of people see GDPR as a business overhead, and what I hope to be able to show you in the next 20 minutes or so is how it can be a business benefit. It's all about consent, and we're going to concentrate just on consent today. We'll emphasise, if you've been in previous sessions or if you've got to know the GDPR, you will know that consent is only one of the legal bases on which you can process people's data under GDPR, but I'm going to concentrate exclusively on consent today. So what we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about our survey says. We ran the survey, indeed some of you may have participated in the last week across various forums, and we've now got the results. I'm going to reveal the results of the survey. We're going to talk about common misconceptions. We're going to talk about the business case for GDPR consent. We're going to talk about how you can use consent as a competitive differentiator. Then we're going to look at some strategic shifts for business. Then we're going to look at our approach, how we can help you. Some common pitfalls to avoid. We're going to finish with a bit about compliance to gold. And then hopefully we'll have 10 minutes or so for some questions. So, our survey says, we asked people, how do you view GDPR consent? And the results were telling, because only 7% of people who responded saw consent as a marketing tool, which is interesting when you think that under PECA, the Privacy and Electronic Communication Regulations, which is part of, I wouldn't say part of GDPR, it runs alongside GDPR, it's all about marketing. And then you've got consent as well, which really is about marketing in lots of ways, often. And yet only 7% of our survey said they saw consent as a marketing tool. Good thing was, I think, and I found this kind of reassuring, that 43% of people said it was a trust builder. 36% said it was just about compliance. And 14% of respondents said they just found it confusing. And this shows that we have an opportunity to shift the mindset, hopefully. So let's talk about some of those misconceptions. Many see GDPR as just a checkbox or a legal headache, and I get it. It's about complex language sometimes. It's about fear of fines. It's about the pressure to get it right. But if we treat it as a strategic lever, we change the conversation. So what are some of the common misconceptions that I hear? I put 4 here that I just picked out. Consent is just a checkbox. Once they opt in, jobs are good. Legalese makes it sound more official, and the more data we collect, the better. Almost like a data hoarder. Please don't be a data hoarder, by the way. It's not a good place to be, but we'll come on to that. Consent is just a checkbox. No, it isn't. Consent is, or should be, the start of a relationship, not the end. It should be that first date. It's about, getting to like people, getting to trust people. But in return, it's a promise of transparency and respect. And one thing with consent that does get forgotten often in GDPR is that you should be able to tell anyone who's given you consent when they gave you their consent and how they did it. Did they do it on a page on your web form? Did they do it on a written form, how did they give you consent? Because it's important to record that, because actually someone's entitled at a later date to come back and ask you for that information. It's a bit embarrassing if you have to say, um, actually, I don't know. So, do record consent. When someone gives you consent, make sure you record it. But it is the start of a relationship, as I say, not the end. Once they opt in, jobs are good. And numbers of people think, once you've got an opt in, once you've got a tick on the box, hey, you can do anything. You can mail those people with the most ludicrous spam they've ever received in their life. It ain't true, or shouldn't be true, because your consent should be fairly clear. Well, it should be very clear, but it should be clear about what people are consenting for, so that people know what they're consenting into. Because then ongoing communication helps build that trust, and you're keeping your audience informed, appreciated, and engaged. And that's really, really important. Um, I know legalese makes it sound more official. Maybe it does. It's actually not the best approach. It's not the approach that GDPR recommends either, because um, people should be clear about what they're consenting to. They should know what they're consenting to. Don't try and hide things in legalese or in jargon, because that just creates confusion. Um, and remember that consent must be freely and clearly given. It's why your employees can't give consent to their employer, because it's not a one-way, it's not regarded as being a fair relationship in that sense. Someone who's an employee might feel, well, if I don't give consent, I might not keep my job. Um, and that's not consent being freely and clearly given. And whilst obviously it's different with a client or potential client, don't make them feel in that situation either. Don't make them feel like it's a sword of Damocles hanging over their head. Make them feel that, they are having that free consent to give consent, or indeed to withdraw it. And then the whole order, the more data we collect, the better. No. You should really only be collecting data that you need. And it's important to respect people's privacy, to reduce the risk, reduce the costs, and increase your trust, because um, data, however we store it, whether we store it on paper, whether we store it on a server in our office, whether we store it in the cloud, which, as I've said a number of times, the cloud, people need to remember, is still a server or servers somewhere. But wherever you store it, it's got a cost. It costs you money to store that data. So the less data you store, the less cost you have. But also, and very importantly, and this is where it can have a real impact on cost, if someone serves you a data subject access request, if someone puts in a data subject access request to you, and you only hold little bits of data, then all you have to reveal is those little bits of data, because that's all you have. Whereas if you hold stacks of data, if you hold, everything up to their inside leg measurement, um, then you've got to reveal all that data if someone puts in a subject access request. Again, that costs money, it costs time to do that. So, keep the data you need to the minimum and review it from time to time, because what you need to have stored a year ago might not be the data you need to store today. Um, but what if we flip the script? So the business case for GDPR consent, and this is about how it becomes a benefit rather than a cost. Consent is more than permission. It's the first step in building a relationship with your customer or your potential customer, because it tells them you're in control and we respect that. And in return, we earn their trust. And hopefully, we earn their loyalty too. Because I get people who say, oh, well, the problem is Yeah, but if we ask consent, and if we have to ask people for consent to market to them, then out of every 50 people who visit our website, we might only get 5 who consent. Well, yes, that's true. I get that. I do. But a big mailing list number without consent is really just vanity. It's not sanity, because I would far rather only mail out to 1,000 people, but know that all those 1,000 people have actually said they want to hear from me, then mail out to 20,000 people who've never heard of me, and all they've done is visited our website and filled in a form. But because we either didn't ask for consent or we effectively pre-ticked that box, then we think it's fine to market to them. Well, the truth is that they just don't want to know. You know, it's not, it doesn't interest them. Yeah, good point, Joe. Exactly my point, that it all costs money. Um, so consent as a competitive differentiator, done right, consent results in increased engagement, better customer retention, and lower unsubscribe rates. Because here's the truth: trust is rare and it's valuable. Companies that lead with transparency and control stand out. Think of brands you trust, because the odds are they've mastered how to ask, listen, and respond well to customer data choices. And this whole thing about reputation and trust is so important. It actually extends beyond consent, but it is so important. I was really interested to read a piece on Monday in the newspaper about the ongoing problems at Marks and Spencer with their cyber security attack, which um, that really does seem to have been a massive attack. I'm absolutely staggered that there's an attack which an organisation with the size and resources of Marks and Spencer is struggling to get on top of. But the interesting bit from this newspaper article was the fact that most M&S customers are still remaining M&S customers, despite that issue, which on the face of it is bad news. It is bad news. It's costing them millions of pounds a day. Let's not underplay it. But because they've got that consent from their customers, because customers trust them, customers are giving them the benefit of the doubt at the moment. They're staying with them. Now, whether that be true in another week's time or 2 weeks' time or 3 weeks' time, of course, is a different question. But it is important that people realise that that trust is there. And part of that is because they, as Joe's just put in the chat, and it's true, that they've been open about it. They're not trying to hide behind it. They're not saying, oh, there's no problem. They're admitting there's a problem, and their communications, yeah, as Joe says, have been incredible. Have been really good, against other clients and against other companies. And I'm thinking of the co-op here, where they had the same situation, but they actually tried to, in my opinion, tried to hide the fact that their customer data had been stolen. Where I think they'd have been much better being open with that and just saying, it has been stolen, and here's what to do to try and protect yourself, is the message they should be putting out, rather than, well, no, we didn't have customer data stolen, and then a day later I'm going to say, yes, we did, because that just looks embarrassing. So let's talk about strategic shift for businesses. What can you do to get better consent so that your clients don't end up like this poor lady here who just looks totally confused? The practical steps you can take are to have clear, jargon-free consent language. Let everyone know what it is they're consented to. Keep it simple. And use clear, human, everyday language. Let users choose their journey. Let them choose what they want to do. And very importantly, don't ghost them. Don't use consent. Use consent as the start of able communication, not, oh, well, we got your consent and nah, that's fine. Was on a website recently, not one of my clients I hasten to add, but I was on one of my clients and I was quite interested in what they were offering. So I went through and filled in the form. I ticked the box to consent that they could market to me, even though I couldn't see their privacy policy anywhere, or a privacy notice anywhere. I filled in the form, and all it did was I filled in the form, didn't even give me a thank you message, just flipped me straight back to their homepage, which was like, doesn't make me feel good as a customer, yeah, or potential customer. I'm like, do they really care? What are they doing? And the other thing which people do with consent forms in particular, and it's a requirement that so many people do not do, is it should be easy for someone to access your privacy policy or your privacy notice from where they're giving consent. Ideally, put a link right beside the tick box so that people can just click it and know what they're consenting to and read the rest of what you do about privacy. In this particular company's case that I was just talking about, they do have a privacy policy. It was on their website, but it was a link at the bottom of the homepage, and that was it. If you didn't click that link, it wasn't on any of the other pages at all, so you couldn't find it. I missed it totally. I went back to them and said, "You haven't got a privacy notice on your website," and they came back to me with a screenshot and said, "Yes, we have it. It's right down here. If you scroll 3 miles down the page, then you get right to the bottom of the page, and you find a single link to privacy notice." Don't do that. Make it simple. People should be on your side, not against you. So what's our approach? How can we help? We can help by simplifying the compliance journey. We help you audit your consent processes. Again, we make sure that you are storing where you get consent from people. We train your teams with sessions like today. Um, and we write policies that people actually read. Because if it's fun, it gets done. If it's a bore, it's a chore, is our tagline. But it's true. It's what we believe in. We believe in making things fun and enjoyable. We're not going to bore you to death with legalese, or I hope we don't. That's certainly not our aim. And through that, we're empowering business to grow through compliance. And yes, you need to be compliant. Yes, it is sometimes a cost, but done right, it's a benefit. Because it should be enhancing your business. So now we've cleared the fog. Excuse me. Let's talk about some simple practical things you can do to improve compliance. Don't over collect data. As I said earlier, make sure that you've got a reason for the data that you're collecting. What are you going to do with it? Is it really any use to you? Because if that's not the case, why collect it? Why store it? What's the point? Don't have ambiguous boxes, and please, please, please don't have pre-tick boxes. Someone going through a consent form where the box is pre-ticked is not giving you consent, because they should be freely opting to put a tick in that box. Now, I know people do use pre-tick boxes. Hands up, I'll admit that some of my clients use pre-tick boxes because I've not been able to successfully talk them out of it. But it's not a good way of doing business. It really isn't. And I make that clear to my clients that they really, really shouldn't be doing it. But you know what I mean? With whatever we do in life, we can lead horses to water. We can't make them drink. But it is important to not have ambiguous language about it. Make it clear. Don't just say, consenting to this means that we can contact you wherever we like, day or night, whenever we want to. People don't want that, do they? They want messages that make sense to them. And don't be silent after consent. If someone's consented to marketing, then do send them some marketing. Because otherwise, what have you just asked them to consent to? Because collecting too much data, using vague checkboxes, or just failing to follow up, all of them are missed opportunities. Instead, aim for clarity, aim for choice, and aim for connection. So, that's about compliance to gold. because done right, GDPR is a growth lever, not just a rule book. Done right, it's a business benefit, not a business overhead. Because when we stop seeing GDPR as a burden and we start using it to differentiate, we unlock real business gold. It's about turning compliance into trust and then trust into growth. Because, people like myself and Joe is on the call. Joe's also a GDPR person. We want your businesses to grow. We're not there to put legalese and procedures in place so you can't trade. That's not why we're there. Because we want you as clients for years and years to come. We don't want to put you out of business. That would be silly. But it has to be done right. So I hope you've enjoyed today's session. As I said, we'll take a few questions in a moment. But before I do, we've got a special offer on at the moment, which actually ends today, according to our graphic there. And it does end today. We're offering 4 live sessions via Zoom. Each session's an hour long. We normally charge for that course over 4 sessions, £600. But we've got a special on at the moment. We're only charging £300 plus VAT for those 4 one-hour sessions. If you're interested in that, do DM me or email me at keithsetinsurity.co.uk and I'll get you booked on. We've got quite a number of people booked on already. I think we've got about 5 spaces left. It's starting next Tuesday. The course is going to be on a Tuesday and a Thursday. Or I should say a Tuesday or a Thursday. Same course, but I'm on it twice in the week, starting next week. If you want to be part of it, as I say, do get in touch and just let me know. And it's just £300 plus VAT. So with that, I'll happily take any questions. So I'll stop sharing the screen so that we can all see each other. And if anyone's got any points they want to make or any questions, please fire away. Joe, anything you want to add before we?
No, I think everything you've said is right. Not that I would suggest that it wouldn't be, but you know, GDPR, if it's embedded in your business, it should be easy to work with, and it should enhance your business in lots of ways. Um, and you'll know this. You Keith, you do a project with a client and you look at how they're doing things, how they're collecting data, and you'll have come across those clients who've got this piece of software for this task, this piece of software for that task, and you actually find that both of them do the same thing and they've got a duplication. So once you sort out the process, you make a choice about which tool they're going to use, and lo and behold, they've suddenly saved themselves 10, 15, 20, 40 quid a month, which, adds up, over the year, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting you say that. I did some work with a client recently where when we started doing the audit and digging into what they were doing, they had 5 different project management systems that they were
Wow.
subscribing to. It was, because one was somebody's pet favorite and then one was someone else's
Yeah,
pet favorite and whatever. And the confusion that was causing and the duplication of data and effort was just crazy.
yeah,
Um, and so, yeah, okay, some people got a little bit disgruntled for a day or two because they got told, you like using that software. Well, the company's going a different route. But long term, it's got to be better for them that they've just got one source of the truth, which is, because otherwise what happens, as we all know as well, if you have disparate systems, is that somebody will update one system, and in fact somebody's moved to a new address and not update the other systems, and then, confusion reigns.
yeah, yeah.
Kate, I think you had a question.
Yeah, we are a medium-size independent school, so we don't fall under public body because we're not a state school, and we have something called Tapestry Journal, which is for little kids, where they have an online scrapbook, basically, where they have videos and commentaries posted, things like that. And the Tapestry Journal gave us their consent form, and it was incredibly granular, very, very complex. It was kind of like, I do consent for them to be, to my photos and videos to be used on Tapestry. I consent for videos only to be used. I consent for text only to be used. I consent for photos only to be used. And then like, I consent for it to be used on marketing, photos only, text only, blah, blah, blah. And it went on and on. And I said to the person in charge of this particular project, I said, in a year, because the deputy head sort of waded in and said, well, somebody needs to keep a record of all this consent. And I came in as GDPR and I said, look, it's too granular. You know, you just need a sort of, I consent to this or I don't consent to the other. Anyway, they wanted to keep it granular for whatever reason. I gave my advice. And so what I have suggested is they refresh that consent in a year's time. So when the kid moves up the school, they may not want their stuff on social media, but they might be happy on internal postings, things like that. So I've suggested that going forward that they come back to me and we refresh the consent, because it was so complicated with Tapestry. And I think their heart was in the right place, the Tapestry consent. It was that you could see they were trying to cover all their bases, but they were just making it very confusing for the parent, I think.
The other thing to remember, Kate, is that, you know, over 13, the child is allowed to give their own consent.
Yes. This is year one. So this is primary for first year out of nursery. So I said for the year twos upwards, let's refresh that consent and let's go back out to parents.
Approach, you know, and I'm sure Keith would agree, is absolutely right. I think my approach, and Keith might have a different one, is that I would give an overview of what Tapestry is, the type of data that would be stored there by the child. Perhaps, you know, and I can speak here as a school governor and as somebody who works with schools actively, I would do a demonstration or some screenshots for the parents to show how it might look. And then give them this information, and then a form that says, I consent for my child to use Tapestry. They are making an informed consent, because this is the other thing. Consent needs to be informed. So if they have no view of what they're consenting to, you know, is that actually a true consent?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that point, Joe, is so important. You know, as I say, it's about having, and I mean, I agree with you, Kate, that it sounds like Tapestry could do with engaging either myself or Joe to help them. But the it's about you know, it's the old acronym, keep it simple, stupid. But if you know, if you can keep it to one or two tick boxes, hey. That's a lot easier for the parent. It's also a lot easier for you, because you've got a lot less to you have to record. And also, you know, I think it as well, if you can get it down to one or two questions, it just helps as well with clarity, because otherwise somebody goes, oh well, I ticked that box about my children's photograph going on there, but I didn't realize that was social media, or you know what I mean?
It complicates it.
But I mean, on the point of being informed, I had something recently myself, actually, where I was at the airport. I was flying out to the Netherlands, and I caught there, you know, that had these little booze kiosk things in the aisle, and there was this company who wanted my information for something, and I was quite interested in it. And I just said to the person behind the counter, "Can I see your privacy notice? Can I see your privacy policy, please?" Yeah. And she went, "Why?" And I said, "Well, because you know, I want to know what I'm consenting to."
Yeah.
And she then gave me this sort of three-page document and tried to rush me through it. Of sort of, you know, be fair enough to her. There were other people standing behind me. I get that, but I would strongly argue that consent there would not be treated as being freely given, because you're being pressured into, sign here
Yeah.
because we want to move on,
Yes.
and it shouldn't be like that. It's
No.
Yeah. So link to Tapestry Journal privacy policy should be on that form, shouldn't
Yes.
it? So they
yeah,
can view that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Because they need to know what they're consenting to, and they need to understand what the data processor, and Tapestry becomes a data processor because it's the one actually doing the storage, right?
Yeah.
And so they should be informed of what their privacy policy is, what their security is, because, while children's data is not considered special category, because of the vulnerability of children
I
who
was going
will
to say they're vulnerable, aren't
all
they?
sorts
Yeah.
of different
Yeah.
stuff, and they won't think it's a problem to tell somebody their name and address, because they are just
Everybody
open and
does it,
trust
and yeah.
open and trusting, and that's how they are. And so there should be from Tapestry some sort of security statement, or
Yeah.
how are they protecting the data, bearing in mind that they are dealing with very vulnerable individuals,
Yeah.
and that's before we even talk about whether any of these children have send needs or any of these other things. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
The only person who didn't give it their consent was the head of IT's child.
well, and the thing is, that tells you something, because they may well have done
Read the
investigations,
paperwork.
yeah,
Yeah.
but they may well have gone to the website, because when my children were younger, I've been in a situation where I was the only parent and was called into the school and said, why won't you consent to this? And I've gone through various elements of what I consider to be unacceptable, and they've gone, oh, our DPO didn't tell us that. And I
Yeah.
said, well, this should have been figured out as part of your
mm,
DPIA or your risk assessment before adopting this piece of software. So,
Yeah.
it is about informing the parents with as much as you can without overwhelming them, but saying, this is what the software is, this is what it's going to do, this is why we're adopting it, this is the kind of data your child will be able to store on this system. Give them a link to the website, give them all this sort of stuff that they can choose. Now, if they choose not to go and look at this stuff, that's up to them. But
Yeah.
from an organizational point of view, if there's ever any issues further down the line, you can say, here's the documentation we gave you with screenshots, or we gave you the website for you to look at. You consented or didn't consent based on what we gave you.
Yeah. And it was clear. Yeah.
yeah,
As the organization who's the data controller, you have complied with GDPR because you have informed them.
Yeah. Yeah. Clear and informed. Yeah.
And the thing is, what you I guess need to remember is that as an organization, you can only do what you can only do, right? And
Yeah.
there will be individuals who will just, and let's face it, a lot of us do it. We scroll down through the terms of conditions, tick the box to say we've looked at it, when actually all we've done is just gone, yeah, I haven't got time to go through all this, and we
Mm.
click.
mm,
And then a bit later on, something happens and it bites us on the bum, because, well, you signed up to 12 months contract because there it is in the terms, but you didn't read it. So it's
Yeah.
that kind of scenario. And the onus is on the individual to read what's being given so that they can give informed consent. But it is on you as the data controller to do the informing so that they
Yeah.
can make that choice about how they consent.
Yeah. Thank you.
That make sense to you, Keith?
yeah. I fully agree with everything you're saying there, Joe.
Yeah.
And yeah, because it is you you can only do so much for people, and then, as Joe said, I mean, we've all done it. I've done it. You go onto a website and the terms and conditions are like 3 miles long, and you get to the bottom and you just say, "Oh, do you know what? Yeah, I need to use this today, so I'll just click on that and say it's okay." And that's not
That's where screenshots would be helpful with Tapestry, because it makes it
absolutely.
more visual, and they can say, "Oh,
Yeah.
that's going to happen.
Yeah.
That's going to happen. Right, I consent to
Yeah.
that." You know, yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
yeah. Some screenshots, or even you might even consider using something like Loom, and actually just doing a very short recording. Of this.
A walkthrough.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
this is what it is. Because I think then, particularly parents, they can then understand what their children are being shown, what they're giving consent for their children to do, um, because again, I think people are wary. I'm thinking of my own grandchildren. I know my granddaughter, bless her, she's a lovely child, but she will give information to anybody because someone says to her, "What's your name and where do you live?" She'll just give it to them because
Yeah.
she- at that age they don't see the danger in doing that, which is why
Mm.
they're the parents and guardians hopefully are there to protect them. Um, but yeah, it is. It's all about making it simple. I normally just say to people that if you can't get the onus of what you're asking people to consent to over in one page of A4, then you need to go back and rethink what you're asking consent for.
Yeah, one page of A4. Yeah.
Because
Mm.
that is just, yeah.
Yeah.
Because as well, if you make it, again, it's everything. If you make it 6 pages, then people won't read it.
They're not going to read it.
It's like,
Exactly.
can't be bothered with that. That's too much effort.
Mm.
Um, I mean, I actually had somebody yesterday who it's slightly off topic, but I had somebody yesterday who was really interesting because we were talking about the fact that their business wasn't GDPR compliant. I said, "Your staff need some training," and their response was, "Oh, we can't afford to have our staff spend 4 hours doing some training." And I'm like,
4 hours.
"Yeah, have you considered the other side of that coin?" Yeah. I mean, it's an old phrase that I use with people like that is say, if you think training is expensive, consider the cost of ignorance. And
Mm.
it absolutely astonished me that the argument wasn't cost. It was, we can't have our staff spending 4 hours doing training. And
Mm.
really?
Mm. Mm.
Um,
Yeah. On also off topic, I've got a meeting with the COO tomorrow. He's new in post, and somebody said on my DPO forum, education forum, to go through with him things where there's a bit of a gap. Like, for example, in our training, to say to him, give me a slot at the beginning of term where I've got all the staff sat there
absolutely.
and
Yeah.
go through DSARs and breaches, because everybody from the gardener to the cleaner to the COO needs to know about those,
Yeah.
and ask him for things that the previous, chappie didn't have time to put in place or whatever. So I'm gonna just ask. I've got my little list of things that I'm going to ask him for specifically, because mostly speaking, the previous guy was excellent, but there's the odd bit where it would be good if I could have a slot with the whole staff body and things like
Absolutely. Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Because
Because
it,
not everybody reads email. Not
no.
everybody looks at
No.
the hub, which is the
Mm,
central information log
Yeah.
on online. You can say, well, it's on the hub, yeah, but not everyone reads the hub.
no.
You look at the hub clicks,
Yeah.
what's getting clicks, and it's like 181 clicks. That's a staff body of 500. It's not everybody is reading it, so yeah, it's
Yeah.
not enough to just put it on a website.
No, I mean, I had a client actually last week, I think, yeah, last week, where we did a session like this. We did just an hour-long overview, really. It wasn't in any depth. And they got all 56 staff in the business to be on that call,
Brilliant.
which was great, because it meant
Mm,
and yeah, there was some staff there who probably are never going to deal with people's data. But at
yes.
least they went away with an understanding. And that's one thing I say to my clients is that it is so important that everyone really knows a little bit about it. And
Yes.
most importantly, say within your store, Kate, that they know to send people who've got questions to you.
Exactly. Yes.
And you know, I mean, I remember, I mean, one of my clients is they do all the distribution of pedigree pet foods. And I did some training there, which everyone attended. And I went back there, I don't know, 6 months later. And there was this guy on a forklift. I always remember this. He's backing back. I doubt out my car. He's backing back across the forecourt. And he went, "Can I help you, mate?" And I said, "I'm here to talk to somebody about GDPR. I thought I'll just see whether you know whether it." And he said, "Oh, you want to go in that door there?" He said, "Up the stairs, first door on the right. Ask for a guy called John." And I was like, brilliant. That was actually all he needed to know.
Yeah,
But
that's really good.
I was standing there thinking, you know what? If I was an inspector from the ICO right now, you'd be
I'd be impressed about that. Yeah.
starting this inspection with a big green tick, yeah, because that's
Mm.
you know, because there's nothing worse than, I mean, I'm sure Joe's probably had the same experience. You walk into an organisation, say to the receptionist today about GDPR, and the receptionist is probably dealing with lots of people's data, and she goes, "What's GDPR?" And you're like, so,
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And
It's
one of the things with receptionists I find is, and I went to an organisation last week where I walked up to this reception desk, and the receptionist has got her laptop, desktop, whatever it is, and she's doing stuff. And because of the position of her computer and where I stood, I could see everything that was on her desk and on her computer screen. And then when she walked away, I could have quite easily taken a picture of what was on her screens. And I had access to all kinds of personal data that was on the screen. So, you know, it's not occasionally done very well. And when I went and had my meeting, that was the first thing I raised, because that one of the people in this meeting said to me, "Oh, we do GDPR so well." I said, "Really?" I said, "Let me give you an example of where you are failing, and let's go from there, shall we?"
yeah.
Needless to say, you know, it didn't really go down very well, but it is what it is, what it is, you know.
Well, no, but I think it's important, Joe, because I've got I had a similar experience where I went to one organisation, asked to see the person I wanted to see. The receptionist got up and left reception to go and
Yeah,
find them.
yeah,
So whilst they were gone, I took their visitors book off the counter and put it in my briefcase.
yeah,
Um, and took it into the room with me, and as a similar experience, met this guy who said, "Oh, I've agreed to see you, but really we got it all covered." And I was like, "Oh, really? Okay."
yeah.
And took his visitor book out of my case, and I said, "Do you recognise this?" He went, "It's our visitor's book. What are you doing with that?" And I said, it was left on reception. It's got lots of information in it, because it's one of these visitor books that asks for, car registration number, mobile number, you name it.
Yeah,
Um, I said, if I'd been a bad actor, I could have just walked out with that and
yeah,
gone. I said, and what's even worse, yeah, I said, is that I've taken that. Your receptionist has gone back into reception. I've been here a good 10 minutes now, and
yeah. What could you have done with that data in 10 minutes?
she hasn't even noticed it's missing. Yeah, and that's, yeah, it's practical things like that people, I think, sometimes just don't realise.
Yeah, yeah. I have to go. So it's
Yeah.
been lovely again, as usual. Nice to meet you, Kate. And yeah, I have to crack on. I'm off to Kent for a few days. So
Oh, good. Is that social or work, Joe?
both really. Yeah, there's I'm meeting up with friends and going to a VA conference that's happening down there. It's a very small, tiny event, but yeah, the weather's good. So yeah, I'm heading out in a little while. So lovely to meet
Brilliant.
you, Kate, and chew the fat. Lovely as always, Keith, to chew the fat with you as well, and in your sessions, they're always very good. And yeah, catch up with you next time.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks, Hilary.
All right,
Really
have a good
appreciate you
day.
Thank
being
you,
here.
Joe.
Bye.
Thanks, Kate.
Yeah, I'll head off now as well. But yeah, I make it a breach if I do my rounds and I find a computer that's unlocked at a desk that's unstaffed. I follow it up with training.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just say that's a breach. If I'm wandering around and and I had to do it with someone senior a few weeks ago, where a desk was unstaffed and a computer was unlocked, and I make it a big thing in training to lock computers. It's really important. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Thanks very much, both.
great to see you here, Kate. As I say, we're here every 2 weeks. So if you want to come back in the future, please do.
That's great. I'll sign in. That's great. Take care. Thanks a lot, Keith. Thanks,
Brilliant.
Dorcas.
Thanks,
Bye
Kate.
now. Bye.
Bye.